Mic check, mic check. Mic check, mic check.
Sir? Oh. Sir?
Hmm. What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the P-Ave Perspective with Mr. O'Neill. Apologize for missing last week, but we back in the swing. And as usual, I'm Mr. O'Neill, and this is the place where we don't just talk about what's wrong in our communities. We actually talk about what we can do about it. Thank y'all for tuning in tonight, whether you're watching this live stream or whether you're watching the video later that I post on YouTube on the P-Ave Perspective page. Hey, I appreciate you tuning in. But like I always like to say, complaining doesn't build communities. Talking about problems don't build communities. Pointing fingers at each other or pointing fingers and blaming others does not build communities. Ownership builds communities. Discipline builds communities. Planning, working together, and most importantly, thinking long term and not just thinking in the moment. But as y'all know, today we're going to talk about really building wealth, building black wealth, man, building wealth through real estate. And we're going to discuss it in the context of our own communities because there's so much untapped potential in our communities, especially here in Shreveport, and like I said, it's probably that way in other places too, but a lot of places, have, been gentrified. A lot of black communities, and I know one of them is in my neighborhood, South Dallas, it's been gentrified. And now it's to the point where, like I was telling people years ago, it's to the point where, it's priced out of a lot of people's range to even stay in the hood now. And like, it's crazy, but I saw it coming. But again, Shreveport is different. There's so much untapped potential, you know what I'm saying, here in Shreveport. And tonight we're going to talk about ways that we can capitalize on it if we really put our minds to it. But like I said, real estate, that's what we're talking about now. And like I always say, long-term thinking. You know what I'm saying? Long-term thinking. Something that I believe we need to have a serious conversation about in the Black communities, and that's building wealth. Building wealth. Like, anybody can make money. Anybody, like, we've all figured out how to make money. But a lot of us still haven't figured out how to save money and to put our money to work for us, to where it makes money for us in the future, and it creates money, potentially income that we can leave to our kids to still earn income off of it. And like I always tell people, it's not about, like a lot of us do, it's not about looking rich. It's not about looking like we successful. It's not about buying things, to make other people think we successful. I'm talking about building actual wealth, the kind of wealth that can provide stability for your family, the kind of wealth that can give you options, the kind of wealth that can be passed down, and the kind of wealth that eventually could change your entire neighborhood. It could change your entire family. And like I said, that's altogether different. I'm all about the community. And like I said, tonight we're going to discuss one of the most common options people use to build long-term wealth. Like I said, real estate. And I'm going to make this conversation very simple, because sometimes we make wealth building, and people talk about wealth building, and I hear a lot of my people, really have with the idea that only rich people can do it. And that's like, that is far from the case. I'm here to tell you now that you don't necessarily have to start rich to start building wealth. You can start where you are. It's all about learning and your habits. But the one thing you do have to do is start thinking different. I stress that all the time. We have to start thinking different. And one of the biggest problems we have in many impoverished communities or in the hoods is it's not that people don't make enough money. It's that our situation forces us a lot of times to think short term. And trust me, I understand why. I've been caught up in that mind state, and I fight that mind state every day, because as real people with real issues, like if you worried about paying the light bill, or if you worried about paying the rent, or if you worried about keeping food on the table, if your car need repairs, if you live in paycheck to paycheck, I've been there. I'm still in that situation. But if you in those situations, you deal with those situations on a daily basis, it's hard to think about what your life is going to look like 10 or 20 or even 30 years from now. That's the hardest thing to do. That is the hardest thing to do, is look ahead when you have so much going on right now that, requires your attention. But you thinking, how am I going to make it through the week? You know what I'm saying? And like, that's understandable. Trust me. Like, we all been there, and a lot of us still there. But here's the problem. If we never move beyond survival mode, if we never move beyond that survival level of thinking, we can spend our whole life just surviving. And like, honestly, like, I spent so much of mine. Like I said, I spent so much of mine in that survival mind state, and I still deal with people on a daily basis who I try to enlighten or who I try to work with or who I try to uplift, you know what I'm saying, in their way of thinking, that it's just in us. It's just in us to think about what can I do today, because like I used to look at it back when I was younger, like I'm not even promised to see tomorrow. But with that mentality, it's got me to the point where I am now, where I'm nowhere near, as financially secure as I would have been if I had started thinking about the future and I started making plans and making, moves that didn't necessarily pay off right away, but things that could pay off later in life. And like I regret that, but it's never too late to start. It's never too late to start, and that's why I believe that we have to learn how to do two things at the same time. We have to learn how to survive today while building something for tomorrow. And like I said, it's never too late. But if we, like I know, if I can learn it, you know what I'm saying, now, I still have time to teach my kids. Hopefully, I'll still have time to teach my grandkids. And that's where we at now. It's still time. And that is what I call the mindset shift. And like, let me give you an example. Like, let's say somebody receives $1,000. You know, nowadays a person would ask like, well, what can you buy with $1,000? But another person would ask, what can I do with this $1,000 that can help me create more money in the future? Or how can I invest this $1,000 to the point where I can turn this $1,000 into more? And a concept, you know what I'm saying, that I peeped a long time ago. Like, and I know a lot of black people can relate to this, but when I was younger, my mother used to tell me all the time that money don't grow on trees. You know what I'm saying? And I never understood, what that means. But then as I got older in life, I ended up reading about a money tree. And I'm like, a money tree? Like, it piqued my interest because, like I said, we as black people, our parents stress that all the time. Money don't grow on trees. But then when I started looking into the concept of the money tree, I realized that it made perfect sense. And the concept of the money tree is looking at your dollars as seeds. And if you plant seeds, if you plant money or invest money the right way, those seeds will grow into what is referred to as a money tree. And those seeds can keep producing money, for as long as, you have it invested. For as long as you have it invested. And I know a lot of people, it won't make sense to you, but think about it, like you said, investing. If you invest money into the right investments, that small investment of say $1,000, can earn you money, not just in your lifetime, but if managed right, it could earn your kids money. It could earn your grandkids money. And just like I said, like once I, really peeped the money tree idea and the investment idea, I attacked it and did my best to learn all I could about it. But like I said, what can I do with $1,000 that can help me create more money in the future? And like I said, from what can I buy with this? Like I said, that is what I call two different mindsets. I call the hustler mindset and the customer mindset. And a lot of us, you know what I'm saying, or have that customer mindset to where when we get money, it's like, what can we pay? What can we buy? And like I said, a hustler's mindset is, how can I flip it? How can I flip it? And we need to get back into that mind state because, like I said, hustler mind state, customer mind state, and the hustler is looking to invest. He's looking to flip his money. And I'm not saying you shouldn't enjoy your money. I know everybody, you work hard, you want to enjoy your money. But I'm saying that we need to learn how to make our money do more than one thing. We need to learn how to put our money to work for us. But some of the money, like I said, some of the money is it need to take care of you today. I know you need to pay bills. I know there's certain things you need to do, pay rent, but some of our money should be working for tomorrow. If not, we'll end up working for the rest of our lives. We'll end up working to make other people, more, wealthy. And that's just not what it's about. I never planned on working, to make somebody else wealthy for the rest of my life. And I know if anybody has really looked at it, we've seen the success stories. We've seen the people who went from, workers, to bosses. And just like I said, if anybody has any aspirations, real aspirations in his lifetime to become a real boss, like I said, I'm in a situation now where I work for myself. But I know in order to be a boss, I got to get in a situation where I can hire people to work for me. That's what boss status is. People say having your own business, like that's cool. But as long as you have to get up and go make the money, I don't see that as boss status. That's good. That's a good start when you're not working for somebody else and you can go out and work and make your own hours and make your own money. But in order to be a true boss, you have to create a situation where you can make money when you're not there. You can make money. Your money is not dependent on you putting in the work. You can hire other people to make the money for you, or you can invest it and generate money in your sleep. But let me ask this question. I always ask questions, you know what I'm saying? Y'all share y'all ideas. But when you get extra money, what is your first thought? What is your first thought? Is it what can I buy? Or is it what can I build? And drop your answers in the comments. But tonight we're talking about changing the question from what can I buy to what can I own? What can I own? But people might ask, like, why real estate? And to that question, I say because real estate can potentially provide several benefits at the same time. Number one, real estate can provide ownership. And it's all about ownership and being a boss. But when you own property, you own an asset. And that's different from simply paying someone else, to live in the house. That's ownership. Number two is appreciation. And over long periods of time, properties can increase in value. Now, it's not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed in this world. We know that. But real estate values can go down. But historically, real estate has been the one major way that people have accumulated wealth. It's proven. Look at the track record. Most wealthy people, most millionaires, billionaires, real estate usually played a part in it. Or once they got their money through whatever they got their money from, they invested in some real estate for long-term wealth potential. But number three is cash flow. Like if you own a property, a rental property, and you can collect enough rent to cover your bills and make a profit, that property may generate cash flow. You know what I'm saying? It may generate cash flow. And again, it's not guaranteed. You have to have the right deal. You have to do the right things. But with the right rental property, that rental property, collecting that rent, it'll cover your expenses for maintaining the property and put some money in your pocket or put some money in your bank account. And like I said, as long as you own it, keep it together, that earning potential is limitless. That earning potential is limited. And like I said, I see it all the time where people have passed those properties and passed stuff down to their kids and even their grandkids. So it's major, but it's not automatically profitable, but because like I said, you have repairs, you have insurance, taxes, there's so many things that come with owning it. But if you can get the right deal, get the right property and do the right thing, like there is major earning potential in rental properties. But like I said, that's a different story. I'm not giving real estate advice. That's why I made sure I put the disclaimer in that. I'm not telling you, that it's that easy. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just telling you what can be done. But number 4 is leverage. And this really is interesting once you learn the concept of leverage. But you don't have to, you know what I'm saying, own the entire property to have leverage. If you can, in a lot of times, in a lot of situations, if you can just, get the down payment to get control of the property, that would give you leverage. You don't necessarily have to purchase, personally, purchase the entire thing, or you don't have to have the entire amount of money to buy the house sitting in your bank account. Financing can allow someone to control the property with a small amount of capital, say like a down payment. But leverage also creates risk. If you borrow money, you have to pay it back. You have to pay it back. So we're not just talking about, going out, get a bunch of loans and put yourself in debt. We are talking about learn how money, financing, ownership, and real estate actually works. Do the work, do the research, learn how it works. But I want to make this clear. Like I said, I'm not telling anybody to go buy a house tomorrow or go invest in anything tomorrow. I'm not telling you to take your rent money and put it into some type of investment. I'm not doing none of that. I'm just telling you the potential. I'm not telling you to borrow no money that you can't repay. I'm not telling you that every piece of property is a good investment. I'm not telling you none of that, but I am telling you to, like anything we've ever done, anything we would do, learn the game. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to future generations. Because if we don't understand how wealth is created, we're going to spend our lives working for the people who do. And let me say that again. If we don't get an understanding of how wealth is created, we will spend our whole lives, our kids and our grandkids will spend their whole lives working for the people who do know how to build wealth. And they'll build wealth off our labor. They'll build wealth off our backs. They'll build wealth off our sweat. And hopefully we tired of that. Hopefully we tired of that. Hopefully we are tired of that, because I know I am. I know I am. But hey, we're going to keep doing what we got to do so we can do what we want to do. But because somebody watching this might be thinking, hey, Mr. O'Neal, like, that's great, but I don't have $50,000 to invest. I don't have $20,000. Like, I don't even have $2,000 to invest. And like, all of that's cool. All of that's cool. But in reality, one of the most powerful concepts that we need to understand as us is cooperation. Cooperation. I tell people all the time, it is so much easier to do something with a group of people than it is to try to do it by yourself. And that's with anything. And like I said, I stress that to my people all the time, because we have gotten to the point where we are less willing to work together, and we are more likely to try to outshine each other and try to, one up each other and outdo each other. And I'm telling you, if you don't know already, that's the hardest way. You can't do anything by yourself. You know what I'm saying? And people say independent. I'm a general contractor and handyman. But, I can say, well, I you know what I'm saying? Like some people might say, I'm independent, I make my own money. But even in that capacity, I'm dependent on my clients. I'm dependent on my customers. If none of my customers call me with the work, I don't make the money. It is what it is. So nothing you do, whether you sell clothes, whether you sell food, you might have your own restaurant, you may cook, you may do all of this, but it's all dependent on the cooperation of other people, whether you're successful or not. So we have to understand that we can't do it by ourselves, no matter what it is. And we need to get back into that mindset of teaming up, partnering up, and cooperating and working together to make something happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't always have to invest alone. That's not how it goes. Like, 5 people who come together and put $2,000 a piece in the pot, they got $10,000. That's way more to work with, you know, than trying to do it on your own. 10 people putting $1,000 in, $10,000. You know what I'm saying? 20 people putting 500 a piece, $10,000. Like, it sounds so much easier because I know people can come up with 200. People can come up with 500. People, you know, someone can come up with 1,000. Especially, like I've been telling people for years, especially around income tax time, because I have watched us blow money fast. I have talked to so many different people on my own, people that I know personally, and say, hey, let's take, you know, like we say, 2 bands. Let's take 3 bands, you know, 1,500 from income tax, and let's put it together, man, and let's try to make something happen. Now, just like I said, just you can't. It's. I'm saying it as it's being easy, but I know you can't invest with everybody. I know this. You know, you can't invest with everybody, and just because you invest in you know, make an investment, buy an investment, that don't make it a good investment. But like, it begins with thinking outside of the box. You know, chopping up with people, seeing who have the same mindset that you have. You know, getting with people, talking about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's one of the main things that I do in me being me. I try to talk to everybody that I'm in communication with about the moves that I'm trying to make. And people like, oh, don't tell everybody what you're trying to do because people will hate on you, and people will, is like, we are so, you know, backwards as a people with our way of thinking. And just like I said, people were like, oh, don't tell people what you're trying to do. They'll wish bad on you, or they'll do it. Like, I don't care, because I know for a fact I can't find like-minded people if I don't share what I'm trying to do with people. Oh, don't tell people your ideas because they'll steal your ideas. I've been there. I've done that. You know what I'm saying? And the one thing I can say is some of the main people who thought they could steal my ideas, they didn't have the education, they didn't have the drive, they didn't have the focus, and they didn't know what I know. So they went out and blowed some money when we could have partnered, you know what I'm saying, with my expertise, my skills, or whatever, and we could have made some money. So that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen. I've never, you know what I'm saying, cared about people stealing my ideas, because the crazy part about it is I've never witnessed yet a person that steal my idea and become successful. And to me, that really kind of hurt, because I want to see my ideas become successful. But like I said, in order to get, you know, to pool some money and make it work for you, you still need to find a good deal. You still need the proper legal structure to make sure you're protected. You need, you know, ownership. You need to discuss ownership. You need written agreements. You need the right financial records. You know, you need to do your due diligence on finding the right property. And you're going to have responsible management of the property. But aside from all that, the concept of cooperation and co-oping and partnering to do something is so valuable for people with limited, you know, capital. That is so valuable and so powerful if used properly. Like, we can combine limited resources to pursue opportunities that may be difficult to pursue as an individual. Together, we can make more happen. If I could find the right 5 people with the right mindset and the right resources, I believe I can make anything happen. Honest and truly. I've seen it done. If you can, you know, whatever you're trying to do, if you can find 5 other people with the same mindset trying to do the same thing, y'all could do it, and it'll be so much easier. 5 working together doing anything is always more powerful and more valuable than 1. But you do have to find the right people. And I know that's hard. It's easy to talk about, but like, believe me, I've been trying to do it. But that's where I want to introduce like 3 simple models for real estate. If you really, know what I'm saying, wanted to get into real estate, and you really had a group of people, you know, that was interested and wanted to work with you. Model 1 is the real estate partnership. And That's basically like two or more people purchase an investment property together. It's simple. And an example, let's say four people decide that they want to invest. And each one of those four people contributed $5,000 to the pot. Now they have $20,000 combined capital, simply. Now they could use that capital toward buying an investment property, depending on the financing and, purchase price, closing cost, or whatever. But the most important part is with us in that situation, don't just shake hands. We can't just shake hands, or we just can't say, oh, we family, so, we're going to do this and we're going to make it happen. Like, that's not a business structure. That's not a business structure. You need everything on paper. You need everything documented. You need who owns what percentage of the property, who is going to contribute how much, who is going to be responsible for management, who's going to be responsible for the repairs, who's going to handle the tenants, and what happens if somebody want to get out of the deal, what happens if somebody stops contributing. And all of that counts. What happens if somebody dies? What happened when the property loses money? Like, all of those things have to be discussed, and all those things have to be decided in order to keep everything straight. It's more, but like I said, it's so much easier for 3 or 4 people to pool together their money, to invest in something, in anything. And like I said, we just have to get that mentality, man. We have to get that mentality. Like, that's what it starts with. Don't get me wrong. You have to get your education. You have to do all of that. And it's going to be work, but like, it's worth it. We, like I said, look around us. Look around us. You know what I'm saying? Like, do your research. Do your research on wealthy people and see how they got there. A lot of them didn't, like we always like to say, everybody didn't join the Illuminati to get wealthy. Everybody didn't have to sell their soul to get wealthy. Everybody ain't got a rich parent or, a homeboy that like, some people hustled and got it out the mud. And just like I said, the mud to spend it and try to show off for other people. They got it out the mud and they kept flipping. They kept flipping. But the lesson is, trust people, but document the business, man. Make sure that paperwork in order. Make sure that paperwork in order. But the second model is come together with some like-minded people and start a small investment group. It could be family, it could be friends, it could be co-workers. Instead of 4 people buying one property, you could create a group whose purpose is to systematically acquire real estate. And let's example, 10 people. 10 people contribute $100 a month. Just put the money up. You know what I'm saying? That equals $1,000 per month. That equals $12,000 a year. In 2 years, that's $24,000. 3 years, that's 36. Now, imagine that while that group, you know what I'm saying, is coming together and putting that money to the side, that while they're doing that, they're learning about real estate. They're just not saving money, but they building capital, the money, they building knowledge with the real estate, experience, and you building relationships. And that's what take you from just making it and just surviving to establishing wealth, man, and building wealth. But eventually, depending on the group's legal structure and finances, they could potentially use the accumulated capital toward an investment property. But another important point, you don't need everybody to be able to contribute the exact amount. In the case of me, and things I've tried to do, I do the work. You know what I'm saying? I rehab houses. Remodel houses for a living. So a lot of times I'll be looking for the investors. So if you know what I'm saying, an investor, and you don't know how to do the work, like, You can partner with, the right general contractor. You can partner with the right. You can partner with a plumber. The plumbers, you can put a plumber in your group to where while you're investing capital, he invests work hours. Y'all can figure that out. Because everything he does on the house is valuable, and that could be his contribution. I know with an investor, with a plumber, with an electrician, and with me as a handyman, we could come together and invest capital, invest, sweat equity is what they call it, work hours working on the house. We could come together with the right investor and all invest on the property. And it would cost us even less then because we spending what we have. We spending what we can contribute, and like you said, some might have the capital, some might have construction experience. Some people might understand accounting, some might understand property management, some might have property management experience. It's so many things. Somebody might be good at finding the properties, somebody might be good at, getting the financing, working to get the financing. Some people might handle marketing, you know what I'm saying, to try to get, people in the house, get tenants in the house. But the key is making sure the contributions and ownership arrangements are defined clearly and like I said, legally documented. That paperwork got to be right, man. That paperwork got to be right. But the bigger picture is we not just building a property. That's not just building a property. That's building collective capital. That is learning how to invest together. Is learning how to manage. That is learning how to analyze deals. That is learning how to negotiate. That is learning how to maintain the property once you get it. That is learning how to create businesses around those same properties. That's how you build an ecosystem. And that's how you build wealth. That's how it's done. That's how it's, and I don't want to make it sound easy like I'll stress. Nothing is easy. Nothing is easy. But I would say to me, it's harder for me to work with somebody else and make them wealthy than it will be to get out there on my own. And that's why I stay striving for that. But model 3 is buying and improving the property in your own community. And like, this is what I believe more of us should do. This is what I believe more of us should do in our community. And this one here is what I'm really on. Like, imagine people from any neighborhood, you know what I'm saying? When we talking about Shreveport, so Cedar Grove, Queensboro, anywhere, Hollywood, it could be anywhere. Imagine a group of people from that neighborhood forming an investment group. And instead of watching your neighborhood continue to deteriorate, what if we start buying some of the properties in the neighborhood? What if we started buying some of the properties in our own neighborhood? What if we came together and took an old ran down house? I've seen a couple of people do it. I actually worked with a lady, when I first moved back to Shreveport, I actually worked with a lady who did it. You know what I'm saying? And I remodeled the whole house for her, that she bought for cash and put her money into it. And just like I said, rented it out for Section 8 and had a nice little piece of change coming in. But you can do that in your own community, in your own neighborhood. Like the houses you look at and say, that's raggedy, that like it's making your property value come down. It's bringing your property value down in your own house. But what if we start asking, what's the potential on it? How much would it cost us to buy it? How much money would we have to put in to remodel it? And then how much could we rent it for? And not only, could you rent it and potentially make some money, you actually get to choose the people that's coming into your neighborhood. You get to choose, a better quality of people who move in the house, who buys the house if you want to sell it, or, like I said, who you choose who you rent it to. So you get the opportunity to make sure that you're getting upstanding people in your community at the same time. But like I said, buying a property in your neighborhood become a rental, a starter home for somebody, maybe a duplex, a community office, housing for, an upstanding working class family, or other uses, other uses. But imagine those same investors coming together and doing that over time. One property becomes two properties. Two properties eventually become five becomes 10. And now, again, you're not just simply investing in real estate. You're participating in the neighborhood development. That's neighborhood redevelopment. That's building your whole neighborhood up. That's building your property value up. That's building the standards of your neighborhood up. And we cannot simply buy property and call it a community development. The investment has to actually create value in your community. That means we should be thinking about, like I said, who lives there, who benefits from the property. Are we improving the property? Are we creating safe housing? Are we creating opportunities for the contractors in our community? Are we keeping the money circulating in our community? Are we helping create a stronger tax base, which helps fund schools, fund, other things in the community? And are we creating assets that can remain in the community for generations? Not just in your lifetime. You can create assets in your community that you could pass down to your kids, to your grandkids, and so on and so forth. But again, it's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different mindset. Completely different mindset. But like I said, my mindset and the mindset that I would, put on people in the community is what they call the buy, improve, and hold mindset. And that's another concept that I want everybody to understand. Buy, improve, and hold. Now, I'm not saying it's the only real estate strategy. It's too many to really go over in this little hour time. So, but for community well building, I want people to understand the power of long-term ownership. And like I said, imagine a group buys a property. They put into the work to improve the property. They rent it out, to good upstanding people. They maintain it and they keep it. Like years later, that property may be worth more than what they originally paid for. During the time, they may have generated rental income. And if they continue owning it, that asset can eventually be passed down as a part of an inheritance. That's the difference between I made some money and I built something that can continue producing value. Think about that. That is the difference between I made some money and I built something that can continue producing value even when I'm gone. Even when I'm gone. But like I said, I don't want anybody leaving this live stream thinking that real estate is easy. People talk about stuff, and I've been told that when I talk about stuff, I make it seem too easy, and it's not. There are risks. You can buy a property. I've seen people buy properties and estimate repairs, and then get in it and find something else wrong, and the repairs end up costing more than they originally thought. Like a tenant can stop paying, or a tenant can, jump up and burn out and move out when you're thinking you got the income. Like these days, property taxes can increase. Insurance is going up. Your insurance can increase. Interest rates can affect your money. It can affect your financing. I've seen whole neighborhood change, and people buy houses and the whole neighborhood flip, and like crime could rise, and it puts down your property value. Your property, partners can disagree, partners fall out, and if when you pool money together, it could be serious legal issues. Like nothing is perfect. Like I said, nothing is perfect. But that's why I'm gonna say this again. Like you have to learn the game. You have to learn the game. You have to get good professional advice before pooling your money with other people. Talk to an attorney, talk to a financial and tax professional, about how to set it up, how to run it, how to maintain it. Like, do your due diligence. Depending on how the investment is structured, security laws and other regulations might apply. It's not as easy as, just one, two, three. And I'm gonna say this: don't go to YouTube and just look up the YouTube videos like everybody do. Don't be, listening to these Facebook posts, and don't even listen to the live stream that's giving you legal advice. That's why I made it clear I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just giving you the ideas. You have to do your due diligence. You have to learn the game. I can sit here and tell you that you can make money hustling, but everybody that hustle know you have to learn the game. You just can't jump out there. You just can't, you know what I'm saying, buy you some wholesale products and jump out there and start slanging. You have to do your work. You have to do your due diligence. You have to do your research. You have to, make sure, you have whatever legal paperwork, legal business setup, or whatever you need before you jump out there. And like I say, that is the key. Learn, research, ask questions, and get it documented. Get it documented. That's part of being a serious investor, man. You got to do it right. But like I always say, I always talk about prosperity, but prosperity is not just about having money. It's about developing the mindset, the knowledge, the relationship, and the systems necessary to create continued or sustainable progress. It's not just about having money. It's about putting that money to work for you and making that money continue to work for you and continue to grow. Plan that money tree. Plan that money tree. We have to stop thinking, how can I get ahead, and start asking, how can we get ahead? How can we get ahead? I guarantee you it's so much easier with we than, and like I said, that's a totally different question. Because if one person become wealthy and the neighborhood stays poor, that's individual success. And I wouldn't want that, really, because I had a type of heart to where I'm gonna try to look out for everybody anyway. So I don't want to become wealthy by myself and everybody depend on me. I want to bring people up with me. I want us to get wealthy because I see with other people and other nationalities and everything, when they get wealthy together, it's harder to fall off. Because if I get wealthy, you know what I'm saying, and the people around me are not wealthy, I could fall off and lose that position. But if more people around me, if we come together and build wealth together and get money together, it's less chance of me falling off, because if I do, I have other people who we've got there together who will help me out and help put me back in position. And that's how I look at it. So what happens when 10 families begin to acquire wealth rather than one person? What happens when 20 families start investing together? What happens when local contractors, we hire local contractors, or the people can hire local contractors to renovate the properties? What happens when local businesses provide the materials? What happens when young people see adults actually owning property? What happens, when you start teaching your children, more about mortgages, about investments, about business ownership, about credit, about real estate? Now we talking generational change. That's generational change. And that's the goal. That's the goal. And if it's not the goal, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. But like I said, I want to leave you, as always, I like to put some on your mind before I get out of here. But I want to leave you with 3 questions. Number 1, what am I doing with the money I have today that can benefit me tomorrow? What am I doing with the money I have today that can benefit me tomorrow? Number 2, what assets can I eventually own instead of continually paying somebody else to use? What asset can I eventually own instead of continually paying somebody else to use? And number three, who can I build with? Who can I build with? Because I don't have $100,000. I don't have 50,000. I don't have 10,000. But what do you have? Do you have 100? Do you have 500? Do you have knowledge? Do you have skills? Do you have time? Do you have relationships? Do you have a desire to learn? Do you have that? Any of that? Because well building doesn't necessarily don't always begin with a lot of money. Most of the time, it begins with a different mindset. That's where it starts. That's where it starts. But we have to stop teaching our children only how to get a job. That's easy. We need to teach them how to earn. We need to teach them how to save. We need to teach them how to invest. We need to teach them how to own. We need to teach them how to build. We need to teach them how to protect. And eventually, how to pass it down. We need to learn that. So many of us need to learn that. Because my goal isn't, and I know people, my goal isn't just to make it out of poverty. My goal is to build something that makes it harder for the next generation to fall back into poverty. That's what we need to start thinking. I don't want to just, climb out of poverty. I want to make it harder for my kids, and I want to make it harder for my grandkids to fall back into poverty. I want to build something that they can continue to build, and from generation to generation. That's long-term thinking. That's ownership. That is community empowerment. And like I tell people, that's what the prosperity movement is all about. That's what it's all about. So before you spend your next dollar, ask yourself, am I consuming something or am I building something? Am I a hustler or am I a customer? You got to make up your mind. You got to think about it. You got to talk about it. And most importantly, you have to do something about it. But this is Mr. O'Neill. This is the P-Ave Perspective. And I'll see you all next Thursday at 8 p.m. But until then, stay focused, stay disciplined, build something, and let's learn how to prosper together. Let's learn how to prosper together. Peace. Y'all take it easy.